I'd lie awake, sweating through my pastel sheets in clenched-teethed terror, bringing the quilt to my throat in a lump and knot as the cries went on in the darkness. They echoed behind the wallpaper as though the space beyond was a fathomless tunnel, and that was part of the terror, the impossibility of it all. There was nothing on the other side of the plaster but an old airing cupboard with a stiff door that no one could open. It was barely large enough to stand in, let alone for a voice to resound through it in such a manner. Yet with the noise routinely fencing off the grasps of sleep, I knew that I wasn't dreaming, though the screams bled so deeply through my slumber that I saw no rest, even then. I was forever absconding to the houses of friends to escape from it, dreading the inevitable return to my own room, the sight of whose poster-clad interior soon elicited wild throes of panic, even before I'd taken to my bed. In time, I learned to wait until my mother had gone to sleep in order to slip off to other rooms, and in this way, I learned that the screams could only be heard through that sole wall, and from no other surrounding it, or below. Though a child, then, I perceived that the walls of the house were all too thin to contain a person trapped within them, though they might indeed conceal bones. Despite my mother's front against the existence of ghosts, I had considered a paranormal angle, and was convinced that I would one day unearth some grotesque history of murder that would lend credence to my hypotheses. One night, I heard my mother stumbling about the upper floor of the house in search of me, having evidently looked into my room to find my bed quite empty. I had tried to tell her of the screaming wall, but she had dismissed the notion, seemingly convinced that I was a fanciful child and would soon grow out of such things. I was ashamed to think what she'd make of my cowardice and of my venturing from my door after lights out. Yet as I lay under a blanket on the living room couch, my mother began to call my name with mounting hysteria, overturning furniture and knocking on surfaces in a frenzy that I did not understand, but that struck a rusted nail of answering terror through my navel. Panting in ragged sobs, my mother staggered downstairs and into the living room, one hand clasped to her collarbone against the trilling of her heart. "Stevie," she said, "what are you doing down here? I thought something had happened to you." I stared, nonplussed, through a haze of gloom. "I can't sleep in my room, Mum," I said. "You know why." I thought she'd rail against me, insist that there was nothing, that my imagination had inflamed me like an illness, that I'd have to see a doctor if it carried on. She'd said as much so many times that I physically winced in anticipation of it. To my alarm, she slid down against the doorway in a boneless motion, her hands kneading her heart. "I thought it'd stop," she whispered. "I hoped it would. That it wouldn't be that way anymore." I sat up against the sofa in rigid surprise. "Wait," I said. "I thought you didn't believe me." My mother ran a hand through her hair, and with a start I saw that it was silvering at the roots with premature age. "I do," she said. "I do believe you. You can sleep somewhere else after tonight. We'll do something with the spare room, make it really nice for you. All right?" Relief ran out of me like overflow from some ancient water tank, pressure seeming to release from every limb. "Okay," I said. "But Mum, why did you make me stay in there if you knew about the screaming?" My mother tousled one sleep-filled eye with the heel of her hand and looked at me with a strange, furtive guilt. "I wanted you to be close to your dad." My father had left when I was too young to remember him, and hadn't returned to the house or been in contact since. I felt little for the man, but resentment and suffering, a wound torn through time by his careless hand. Thus, I didn't understand my remaining parents' statement until I was 17, having come home from a clandestine house party to the sound of my mother crying, somewhere high up in the house. Even before I tried the door to my old bedroom, I knew that was where she was. I found her kneeling on the stripped mattress, her palms and right ear pressed to the wall, listening to the screams as she rocked and moaned under her breath. She reeked of alcohol. She was drunk, I realized, with humiliation. Drunk and crying, and scratching at the wall as though she wanted to take the screamer into her arms to hold them. I recalled what she had said about my father, how she'd wished me to be close to him, through the wall. Had he died and remained in the house, as all my childhood I'd been so sure some unnamed soul had been? If so, how had the death come about, and why hadn't my mother told me? I sobered up so fast that I forgot I'd been drinking myself. "Christ," I said unsteadily, and I went to help her up and haul her away from the room. With balled fists, she pushed at my shoulders, wanting to go back. He needs me. He needs me. Let me stay with him. You're drunk, Mum, I said. Thank God she was thin, as light as a child in my arms. Let me get you to bed. Get you some water. No, no, she insisted, her breath hot and sickly and sour with wine. I need to tell you the truth about what happened, where your dad went. He left when I was 4, I snapped, although I no longer believed it. He's not here. My mother stumbled free of my arms, her eyes alight with some emotion I could not place. He is here, she insisted. He's been here all this time. I'll show you. She went to the airing cupboard door and kicked at it till its stiffness pulled loose from the frame. Switching on a light, she beckoned me in and pointed at the left-hand wall, the one it shared with my old room. Ignoring my rising agitation, I bent down to look, deciding to humor her. There, she said. That's your dad now. Speak to him if you want to. I think he screams so much because he feels alone, because he doesn't know where he is or what happened. Maybe he'd feel better if he heard your voice.